Hey YouTube, Rotor here, and today I am going to try to teach you how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! So this is going to be probably a multi-part series. I won't make it too long. I'll try to keep it as condensed as I can while still making it simple for you to learn, because I don't want to rush too much in, but I don't want to drag it out, make you watch a million things. So yeah, I think I'll just get started and not ramble too long. So the first thing that I will be going over is the three main types of card. Pretty much every card in this game is one of these three types of cards, that being monsters, spells, and traps. I won't go too in-depth about them. I'll probably have a video for each, but for the most part, monsters are just the things that you will be putting out onto your field and doing battle with. They're all like creatures that you're going to be using to battle your opponent's creatures and do damage to them. That's just the basics of how monsters work. Spells are cards you can play right out of your hand, and they do a variety of helpful effects. I won't go too in depth, but generally, this is just the card that you can play straight out of your hand at any time, and just have whatever beneficial effect it gives. And then trap cards. These are cards that you cannot use on your turn right away. You have to put them face down and then wait at least until your opponent's turn. But once your turn is over, you can use these at any point, and these are meant to be cards that interact with your opponent on different turns. So they can react to your opponent doing certain things to kind of mess with their playing. But yeah, that's the general idea between all of these. Interact with your opponent, benefit you doing your combos or interrupting with things, and monsters to do battle with. That is the basic card types. I'll go over in depth in other videos, but for most of these, they will go in your deck. Your deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be between 40 and 60 cards, so you do have some flexibility. You generally would want to be closer to the 40, just because then you're more likely to see the cards you want to see. But if you happen to have 40 cards in a deck and then you get a few more cards you want to add in, then you have that flexibility to add those in. So that is your deck. And then over here we have something called your extra deck. It's not just a second deck. It is between 0 and 15 cards. And this has special types of monsters that if you meet certain conditions, that you can summon bigger creatures out from your extra deck. There's a couple different types of cards there that need different certain conditions, but for the most part, extra deck monsters are just combining a couple regular monsters into a bigger monster. And you always have access to these versus in your regular deck, you have to draw cards or search cards. Extra deck, you always have access to. You can always use these monsters as long as you meet that condition. And then the last of the cards you have access to is a 15 card side deck. Yu-Gi-Oh is generally played 2 out of 3. So you play 3 games, and whoever wins 2 of those games wins. And so between those games, you can swap cards out from your deck or extra deck with your 15 cards in your side deck, which generally, for a side deck, you generally just have cards that are good against some decks, but not every deck. So you don't want to play it in your deck because it's not good against some decks. But if you go against a deck it is good against, then between your games you can swap out and play cards that are good against those decks. So that is the 3 kind of areas that you have access to cards: your regular deck, your extra deck for special monsters, and your side deck for in-between games. Then I guess I will just go over the field. The general field of Yu-Gi-Oh! You've got your deck and your extra deck. You have 5 zones for spell and trap cards. So these, this is, you have to kind of share between spell and traps, which is usually fine because you'll be playing more monsters anyway. But you only have 5 zones, unlike something like, I know Magic has you can just put as many things out as you have. You are limited in Yu-Gi-Oh! To just 5 spells and traps and 5 monster zones. So those are limits for certain types of cards so that you don't go totally out of control. So you have 5 spell traps, 5 monsters, and up here there's 2 extra monster zones. Those are specifically for extra deck monsters. So when you use an extra deck monster, you can put it down here in a regular monster zone, or you can use an extra zone up here. So you get a 6th zone. There are 2 zones. When you take up one, then the other is your opponent's. You can go to either one of them, but you get to choose one, and then you don't get to use both. Your opponent does get to use one of them. So then you can have one up there and 5 regular monsters down here. And then the last couple things, right next to our deck here, we have the graveyard. That's if any cards on the field get destroyed, then they go to the graveyard. There are cards that can get things out of your graveyard, so it is a nice resource to have, but generally, all you need to know is if a card dies, it goes to the graveyard. And then the last zone is the field spell zone. That's a zone just for specific types of spells that generally have a wider effect across the field, but I won't go too in-depth with that. I'll do that in a spell-specific video. But yeah, that is what that last zone is for. So yeah, that is the general field of Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess the only other thing to mention is how a game usually starts, just as another basic note. So you'll shuffle up your deck and you'll draw a hand of 5 cards. So that is, I know, not the same as some other card games. I know Magic has 7 card hands. Yu-Gi-Oh! You start with 5. And then you have those 5 cards to start doing your cards. You get to play with those 5 cards. Some of them can get you more cards. Some of them can get you enough monsters to summon an extra deck monster. But that is how you generally start a game. I don't want to get into too much in-depth with this one yet, because I will go over in the next videos. Probably I'll go over different types of monsters and different types of spells and traps, because there's a few different types, but they all work fairly similar to each other. I just thought I'd have the first video here just explaining the basics, like the types of cards, the 3 different special decks we have, and the field itself. So I think that will do it for this first episode. I'm going to try to keep these relatively short, but pack enough information to make them worthwhile. So yeah, watch out for the next video. And this is Rogue Tier, signing out.